From Madison, Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association presents the debate between the Democratic and Republican candidates for governor. And now, the president of the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association, John Lobbs.
Good evening. Wisconsin's radio and television broadcasters are pleased this evening to be able to continue our public affairs broadcast tradition, sponsoring widely broadcast debates in major Wisconsin political campaigns. This evening's debate is the first of two debates we will host this year. One this evening in the campaign for Wisconsin governor, and another on Friday, October 23rd in the campaign for the U.S. Senate. Tonight's debate will engage the two major candidates for governor, the Democratic candidate Ed Garvey and Republican candidate Tommy Thompson. This evening's debate is made possible in part through generous grants from Blue Cross and Blue Shield United of Wisconsin and Alliant Energy Corporation. And now on their behalf, Mr. Thomas Hefty and Mr. Errol Davis.
In the nearly 60 years that Blue Cross and Blue Shield has been providing health care services to the people of Wisconsin, we've seen many changes in our society. Through it all, Wisconsin has stood out as an example of how good government can work.
At Alliant, we believe that, just as in business, effective government means listening to people and seeking creative solutions to their needs at home and in the workplace. But good government depends upon an informed and educated public. That's why debates like this are so important to our political process. We invite you to spend the next hour listening to the candidates and learning about their positions on the important issues that we all face.
Then the most important step is up to you. Be sure to make your voice heard by voting on November 3rd. Our future depends on it.
The format for tonight's debate will follow the traditional format we have used and has been agreed to by both candidates. It will allow for the candidates to make opening statements, to respond to questions from a panel of reporters, offer rebuttal to one another, and finally for each candidate to make a closing statement. The order of responses has been previously decided by a coin toss. Our panelists this evening include Melissa Langben, reporter and news anchor for WAOW-TV Wausau, Scott Robert Shaw, news director for WIZM Radio La Crosse, and Melody Wilson, reporter and news anchor, WITI-TV Milwaukee. We will begin with 1-minute opening statements. Mr. Thompson?
Thank you, John, and I want to thank the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association for holding this debate. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going through the most economic success that this state has ever seen. Together, we created 650,000 new jobs. We've eliminated welfare, taken thousands of people out of poverty. We got the best health care system. More people are covered than any time before in any place in the United States. We got the strongest and best schools and accountable and accessible. We also have retained and purchased more pristine land than any time before in our history. We have been able to give the people of the state of Wisconsin a quality of life second to none. When I took over 12 years ago, the state of Wisconsin was somewhat of a joke in the Midwest. We were laughed at, and now we are the economic marvel of the whole nation. This is our sesquicentennial year. We've had a great year. The last 150 years have been great, but the next 150 years, with your help, can even be greater. We want to build upon our successes, and we want to make Wisconsin the best state in America.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Mr. Garvey, your opening statement.
Good evening. 13 months ago, Barbara Lawton and I set out in our rickety old van we call the Underdog to go out and see whether or not the people of this state really truly believed in democracy. Frankly, though pundits and others said we couldn't do it, because they said if you limit your campaign contributions to $100, there's no way you can match the special interest money that would be poured in to the governor's campaign. After all, he's raised some $16 million from special interest since he was elected, but we have found that in fact the reaction has been tremendous. Over 10,000 of you have contributed money and time to our campaign, and we now believe that people do care more about democracy than they do those 30-second spots. Our view of where we are in this state right now is we have many good things to say, but there are many problems that you will not hear about from the governor that we'll be talking about this evening. What I'm confident about is this. People do care about democracy. They want special interest money out of politics, and they want to make sure that when people are elected to public office that they respond to you. Barbara Lawton and I will be your lobbyists.
Thank you, Mr. Garvey. We'll now move to the question and answer period of our program, and our first question will be from Ms. Wilson to Mr. Thompson.
Perhaps the biggest issue in this race has been the tax plans that each of you have put forward, so that seems a logical place to start. Governor Thompson, your plan that you and Republicans have proposed would cut income taxes over the next 4 years, 7.5% as I understand it. Would you please respond to two things? One, the charges that the wealthiest would get most of the benefit from this plan, and two, what about long term? How do you sustain those tax cuts, particularly if the economy does not continue to be good? I heard today that some people are suggesting a recession next year is a very likely possibility.
I believe the state of Wisconsin's economy is so strong. That's why I want to give everybody a tax cut. In this tax program that we're going to be able to reduce, we're going to eliminate all of those individual families that make less than $18,000. They will not have to pay any income taxes at all. We're eliminating the marriage penalty, so the marriage couples will be able to have the same break as some individual single person and pay the same rate. We also put indexing back in the tax code, and we are giving a $1.8 billion tax cut to everybody across the board. And 90% of the money is going to go to those individuals making less than $95,000, 90%. And so it is truly a huge tax break for those that are at the low end and the middle income taxpayers of the state of Wisconsin. We also want to continue to drive the economy, and right now is the best time because we have a surplus, because our economy is strong. Now is the time to give the taxpayers back a tax reduction, a tax break for everybody, every man, woman, and child in this state. And we have made sure that we are going to take care of the low income by eliminating those under $18,000 and giving the bulk of the money back to those individuals making less than $95,000.
Mr. Garvey?
The Thompson tax plan is clearly ill-defined. He says, let's wait till after November and we'll give you all the details. But the fact is that those at the very top of the scale would save roughly $17,000 over the period of the 4 years or 5 years, whereas those in the middle would not have nearly as much money saved. The average family would save about $700. Barbara Lawton and I have put together a tax plan where we are asking for a serious cut in property taxes because that's the cruelest tax of all. That's the tax that is important for all of us because senior citizens are often forced to make a decision to sell their homes. Under Tommy Thompson, property taxes have gone up over 80%. Income tax collections over 127%. The cost of government has doubled. So frankly, the tax plan that he has proposed is very much like the tax rebate they gave last year. Those at the very top got $18,000 back. Those in the middle got about $22 to $25. The Garvey-Lawton approach is much different. We need to help the middle-income parents. We also want to help those at the bottom who have to worry about buying shoes and clothing. So we exempt those items under $100 from the sales tax. The governor used his veto pen to protect those who would buy skyboxes at the luxury boxes at Brewer Stadium or the other sports stadiums. I think if you're going to make a choice, obviously you should worry more about the family struggling to make it and buy their school supplies than you do about those who buy the luxury boxes.
Mr. Thompson, you have 30 seconds on rebuttal.
We eliminate all those people making less than $18,000 from any taxes. 90% of the money goes to those individuals making less than $95,000. Mr. Garvey has not read our plan, so he certainly doesn't understand it. And of course, Mr. Garvey's plan is unconstitutional. He's given you a promissory IOU that he's going to give you a break 4 years out. Under the Thompson plan, you're going to get a tax cut for every man, woman, and child right now, this year. And I think the people of the state of Wisconsin want that economy to continue going instead of having tax increases, which my opponent wants to give every person.
Thank you. The next question is from Scott Robert Shaw to Mr. Garvey.
Thank you. Some would argue that our democracy is in crisis. More and more voters are staying home. They're apathetic. They're cynical. Elections, in many instances, have become auctions. Those who outspend tend to win those elections. What needs to be done to reduce the escalating cost of these elections, to level the playing field for candidates so that anybody who's qualified, regardless of wealth, has an opportunity to gain public office?
Well, it's an excellent question, and I have actually written a book saying that our democracy is on the auction block. Frankly, elections should not be auctions. They ought to be elections, and we ought to be worrying about whether or not our citizens can participate, and everyone has an opportunity to participate, irrespective of how much money they have or how much they can raise. When we started out, people said, well, you can't run against Tommy Thompson because you'll have all that money from the corporations and the political action committees. Barbara and I decided that we would take it on. We got in our van. We said we're going to limit contributions to $100 because, frankly, when you're talking to young people, you can't really say to them, we are going to be honest with you, and once elected, we're going to change the system. The only good thing that's happened, frankly, with respect to campaign financing is electronic filing, and we're the only campaign in the country to put all of our contributors on the net. I think if we're going to restore confidence in campaigns, we've got to get big money out of it, get rid of those big contributions. If you don't do that, then you're going to discourage people from running. And you say to people, why bother to vote because my $100, my $50 doesn't count? So I'm proud to say that we have 10,000 contributors who have made it possible for us to be here tonight. And I believe that we're more the state of Bill Proxmire with his $100 limit on his overall spending than we are the state of the big Political Action Committee contributions.
Mr. Thompson.
I'm the only one that put forth a plan. It's called the Kettle Commission. I believe that we have to reform our campaign tax laws, and that's why I put forth the Kettle Commission. I didn't get it passed, but I'm going to go back in front of the legislature next year. It was bipartisan, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 1 independent, Don Kettle. It was probably the most innovative campaign reform plan ever in the history of this state, and I know in this country. And we put it forth. We have high ethics and high election laws already in the state of Wisconsin. I've adhered to each and every one of them. In fact, in 12 years, we've never had a violation of our campaign filing laws whatsoever because we adhere to the law. And Mr. Garvey talks about 10,000 people participated. In the Thompson team, we have 50,000, 5 times as many people. And everybody that wants to get involved in the Thompson campaign certainly is encouraged to, and we want as many people as possible. And you know, 80% of the people that have contributed to me have contributed less than $100. And those are the individuals that are from Main Street, Elroy, and from Kendall, and from Superior, and from the central city of Milwaukee that are supporting me because they believe in me. 78% of the people of the state of Wisconsin like the direction the state is going, and I strongly believe that with your help we can continue to move Wisconsin forward into the 21st century with the kind of changes that are going to make more people involved. And I believe very strongly that you know that we're going to be able to keep doing that until we complete it and get the job done.
Well, what the governor didn't tell you is that there was a Heffernan Commission by a former Chief Justice of our state Supreme Court that went much further than the so-called Kettle Commission. And in 12 years, he's not implemented any of the reforms that we need to have in order to make this work. So we are looking at a campaign now where he has received over $500,000 from realtors, $1 million from bankers, $1 million from manufacturers. The cynicism that we're talking about comes from the special interests. When you vote for Garvey and Lawton, you'll elect 2 people who go into office with no strings attached because, frankly, we're just simply not for sale.
Thank you. The next question is from Melissa Langben for Mr. Thompson.
I'd like to turn our attention to education, and my question is, how do we maintain, or can we maintain, safe quality schools at a time when they're increasingly faced with cuts, whether it be in academics, athletics, even things like busing, because they cannot afford those programs anymore because of increasing state and federal mandates as well as state revenue caps?
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that we have picked up 2/3 of the funding of education. When I came in as governor some time ago, 12 years ago, we were only picking up 45%, 48%. We now have been able to pick up 2/3. We've increased the amount of money from the state of Wisconsin back to the local units of government, back to the schools by 180%. And we were able to put on cost controls. The Garvey team wants to take off cost controls, which is going to drive up property taxes. We were able to reduce property taxes for everybody across the state of Wisconsin because of those cost controls. We also, of course, are putting more money into schools. When I came in as governor, there was no money going into Capitol buildings and safe schools and classrooms. Now you see classrooms and new schools being built all over the state of Wisconsin. Why? Because we're picking up 2/3 of the funding. And we're going to keep doing that under the Thompson team, because we know that's where we need to really get the improvement for the quality of education for tomorrow for our children. And we also, of course, I just put in a $500 million for new innovative things in telecommunications. Distance learning, $500 million called Teach Wisconsin. We're also putting more programs into the city of Milwaukee in order to improve the quality of education in the city of Milwaukee. Our education is improving. Look at the grades. Look at the scores in the last year. We're #1 in America, and I'm proud of that. And we're going to keep doing that with your help and with all the help of the people of the state of Wisconsin.
I think the reason that I certainly get the support of educators, teachers, and those who are concerned about the school system, because what we're looking at now is a crisis in education when it comes to funding. So you make a valid point. I was just with the Janesville School District where they had a joint legislative committee representing various members of the society. Their biggest problem is unfunded and underfunded mandates. And under the Thompson plan, what's happening is this. We're pitting parents of special education children against those with gifted and particular needs. We're looking at schools now making choices between fixing the roof or having foreign language. So I think we're adding to the problem that we're going to have down the road. And when the governor says he's reduced property tax, I just think anyone who is paying less in property tax today than they were when he was elected governor should definitely vote for him. And the rest of them should vote for Garvey and Lawton, because we want to take the school property tax off, or the school costs off the property tax, so that the cost from the state would go up to 80%. But the number one thing is this. When the state makes a commitment, it should pay for that commitment. No unfunded or underfunded mandates, as you see in the Janesville school districts and school districts all over this state. So when you take a look at these two programs, I have no doubt how you're going to find or who you're going to vote for.
Mr. Thompson, 30 seconds on rebuttal.
As I've said, we picked up 2/3 of the funding of education, 180% increase since I've been governor. We're building new school buildings, new technology in every schoolhouse, every library. We've been able to do this, and school people all over the state of Wisconsin are supporting me. The teachers union does support Ed Garvey. Why? Because he promises to take off cost controls. Cost controls are going to drive up your property taxes, the elderly, the farmers all over the state of Wisconsin. If you want your property taxes to go up, vote for Ed Garvey, because they will.
Thank you. Melody Wilson, your question for Mr. Garvey.
I'm going to go back to the tax plans. This time, Mr. Garvey, your plan, which you touched on a little bit earlier. Would you respond to some questions specifically about it? First of all, that it would take a change in the Constitution, which requires several years, that it would pit the wealthier against the, and big business against more of the middle-class taxpayers, and also that it would chase business away from Wisconsin, and even small business has, in some cases, come out against your plan.
Well, certainly some of the big business interests have come out against it. They're huge contributors to the governor's campaign. They've been getting the tax breaks. I mean, every time there's a tax break for big business, the governor can't wait to sign it into law. The problem has been there's been a tax shift from big business and the wealthy to the middle class. And so we are trying to do an innovative, or take an innovative approach, and that is to reduce the tax for the working family that is struggling to make ends meet. Now, when people say that if you are going to lose jobs, we are cutting taxes for small business by 12%. This is one of the first times you're going to see an actual cut for small business. The reason we're doing this is that's where most of the jobs are created. That's the area where we need stimulation. It's not necessarily with the big business interests, where those big business, some 800, would only receive a tax increase. As to the other part of your question, I'm not sure the first part of it was...
The change in the Constitution,
right,
which would take a few years.
Well, the first time it lost by roughly 1,000 votes within 900,000 who were voting. The second time it came up, the governor, along with Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce, put in $1.5 million in television spots that distorted it. This time you're going to have a governor, Ed Garvey, and a lieutenant governor, Barbara Lawton, who will be leading the way for public education and making sure that the voters understand the importance of this amendment. I believe it'll pass by 80%, and my Democratic colleagues feel the same way. I don't have any doubt when people see real property tax cut, saving them over $800 million, they are going to vote in favor of it.
Mr. Thompson.
You know, I really am surprised that anybody that's running for governor would advance an unconstitutional, illegal tax plan. You're not going to be able to put this plan into effect for 4 years. And it's already been voted down twice by the people of the state of Wisconsin, last time by 2/3. In regards to taxes, taking off cost controls, which Mr. Garvey is talking about, is going to raise everybody's property taxes across the state of Wisconsin. If you want a property tax increase, then vote for Mr. Garvey, because you'll get one. In regards to small business, 15,000 small businesses are going to see a tax increase. I just talked to Paul Sherman, who runs a small cheese company. In fact, it's the oldest cheese company in the state of Wisconsin, up around Columbus. And he said that Garvey's tax plan will be increasing taxes by $100,000. Do we want to go back to the 1980s when I came in as governor and we had all those companies leaving Wisconsin, jobs leaving, and so on? The Garvey-Lawton tax plan is a tax on small business. Every small business in the state of Wisconsin that grosses over $5 million is going to have a huge tax increase, and that is 15,000 small businesses in the state of Wisconsin. It just doesn't work when you have an unconstitutional plan and illegal that wants to tax business. You know, I believe very strongly that every person in the state of Wisconsin needs a tax break. That's why we advanced our income tax cut for every man, woman, and child immediately. Not something in the future, not a promissory IOU that maybe it'll happen 4 years out. It just doesn't work.
Well, what you just heard is a double speak, because the fact is we're cutting taxes on small business, not increasing them. Now, the governor says we can't trust local school boards to make sure that we're staying within a budget. Here's a man who has doubled the cost of state government in his 12 years, increased every tax you can find, who says don't trust local government. It's sort of topsy-turvy. It used to be that Republicans thought the government closest to the people was the best. Now he believes that everything in Madison is going to do a better job for you. Frankly, we have a lot of faith in those local officials, because they ultimately, of course, have to pay the tax bill.
The next question is from Scott Robert Shaw to Mr. Thompson.
Thank you. In the last few years in the western part of the state, there has been a tremendous increase in the number of prison facilities that have been opened, with Prairie du Chien, now New Lisbon, Boscobel, and also in Black River Falls. The growth of the prison system comes at a time when largely the crime rate has remained relatively stable, with the exception of juvenile crime. How do we balance the need to keep our communities safe with the rising cost of incarceration?
Scott, first off, we have reduced crime in the state of Wisconsin by 12% since I've been governor. And one of the reasons we've been able to reduce crime is those individuals that commit the crime do the time. I make no apologies for putting people away in our institutions. People that prey on our elderly, our children, by selling drugs or sexually assaulting people. We put those individuals away, and as a result of that, crime has gone down in the state of Wisconsin by 12%. We still are 13th in the nation, lowest as far as putting people away. We are the 45th safest state in America. And one of the reasons, because of my leadership and my truth in sentencing legislation, the fact that we have built some prisons and we put people away. I don't think it's right, to sentence somebody to 20 years and that individual gets out in the streets in 4 or 5 years. And I know my opponent is talking about the fact that he doesn't want to build any more prisons. Well, the only answer then is to send them back to the community. And you know something? In all the years that I've been governor, nobody has written me a letter saying yet, please send some more prisoners to our communities. I think it's time to get tough. We have gotten tough, and as a result of that, our crime has gone down, and we have had to build some prisons, and we're going to have to build a couple more. I hope not as many as estimated, because I believe that we can do a better job in the front end where we're putting more money into education, and that's the future of stemming the tide in prisons.
Mr. Garvey?
I just want to say that, you talk about a corrections budget that has increased tenfold since he has become governor. And the question is whether we're safer today or not. The community is most at risk when a prisoner comes out of prison and returns to the community. Under the Thompson administration, you have 3 prisoners for every guard within these cement walls. But once they get out into society, we have 1 probation and corrections officer for every 60 to 65 prisoners who have just been released into society. Now, some 50 or 60,000 have been released while he's been governor. The question is, what kind of a person is going back into our society? And when we look at his prison program right now, we are so overcrowded that the budget that his Department of Corrections has proposed for next year is $1.8 billion, much more than the amount of money we're committing to the University of Wisconsin system. So what we have to be looking at is, how do we make our system safer? What happens when those people are at risk? The governor, in a way, says, well, Garvey just wants to release prisoners. Wrong. He's been releasing them. The question is, what kind of prisoner and what kind of help do they get, and how is the society protected once they're out on the street? And that's that's where the system begins to fall down. So I look and see now we're sending prisoners to Oklahoma and Tennessee. There have been scandals with respect to the way they've been treated. He doesn't have an answer. He's created a crisis, and now if you follow what he's saying, we would have to build a prison about every month in order to take care of the overcrowding that we now have in our system.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Thompson?
We're the 45th safest state in America. We are 13th in the least as far as sending people away to prison. And we have 17,000 individuals right now, and we have a capacity of 12,000. You either build prisons or you release them to the community. My feeling is that we have to build some more prisons. But we're also teaching people in prison how to work, having a skill so they will be able to be rehabilitated when they get out on the street. But I believe that the citizens of the state of Wisconsin want individuals that commit crime and get sentenced for that crime to spend the time, and we will keep doing that for the foreseeable future.
Melissa Langben, your question for Mr. Garvey.
My question is, what is the single most important characteristic that you would bring to the governor's office?
I think when you're thinking about candidates for governor or lieutenant governor, you have to, let's face it, make a judgment about the person that you're trying to elect. What's the background? What's their, what are their ideas? What's their philosophy of government? I think in one sense you take a look and you say, who have they chosen to run with in terms of lieutenant governor? I've made a choice, and that's Barbara Lawton, and she is going to run with me as she has as a team. We plan to govern as a team, and I think when you think about state government and all of its facets and all of the work that has to be done, this is a big job, and it requires a government that looks more like the rest of us. Unfortunately, government in the Thompson administration is not reflected the diversity of our population. It will under a Garvey administration. I mean, I've spent most of my life trying to work for those who do not have voice to make sure they do have a voice. That's why we chose to fight in the civil rights movement for women's rights, and that's why, in fact, I'm running for governor, because I believe that this government must be fair, it must be diverse, and it must reflect the best traditions of the state of Wisconsin.
Mr. Thompson?
I believe honesty. I believe integrity. I mean, somebody with passion, with ideas like welfare reform that we've been able to pass, innovative ideas like family care, badger care, health care, things that move Wisconsin forward. Wisconsin is the star of the snow belt. It's the star of the country. People all over America are looking to Wisconsin for leadership. Why? Because of the innovative programs that we've been able to start. In regards to minorities and women in the Thompson administration, we have put more women into cabinet positions than any previous administration ever. I have been nominated, I have received awards, and 175% increase in women as senior managers. 57% of the people that were hired in the last several years in civil service and state employment have been women. The bulk of those individuals have been advanced into senior management positions. We have put more minorities into state government than any time before. I make no apologies whatsoever because I believe in it. And why we've done it is because they're the best. In regards to what Tommy Thompson brings to this, he brings a passion to make Wisconsin stronger and better tomorrow than it does today, and be able to come in with innovative ideas like the welfare reform and like badger care that are going to cover people with health insurance, family care, so that seniors will be able to stay in their own homes. We've been able to expand our COP program from 3,400 slots to 20,000. And now we've got a family care plan that is going to become a model for the country. All of these things are the things that make Wisconsin such an outstanding star of the country.
Let me talk about what he's just said, honesty and integrity and so on. When we talk about Wisconsin, where are we? We have the lowest wages in the Great Lakes area. We have the highest taxes in the Great Lakes, the second highest in the nation. So when we're talking about what's happening in the state of Wisconsin, we at least also have to acknowledge that some things are not so good. 500,000 of our citizens are below the poverty level. 500,000 are without health care. 132,000 children. And when we hear about the end of welfare, what you have not heard is an end of poverty, because the programs that the Thompson administration put forward have not helped people out of poverty. They've simply taken them off the rolls.
Thank you. The question is from Melody Wilson for Mr. Thompson.
Governor, the last legislative session failed to pass anything that would reform the Milwaukee public school systems, which you had said initially was a priority of yours. And since then, we've seen the Milwaukee School Board pass or approve a teacher's contract that many consider controversial and extend a superintendent's contract with little or no review. Can you tell me what specifically you would tell the legislature this next time around you would like to see done to change the way MPS does business?
I believe that the Milwaukee Public Schools are on the cusp of turning around and being one of the great schools in this country. Why do I say that? We have started now choice. We have started public school choice. We have school to work. We have apprenticeship programs. We allow for students and parents to have more involvement. And I think you're going to see a turnaround in the Milwaukee Public Schools. We still need to close down failing schools. And this is something that I'm advocating because I think it's important. We also need to make sure that more parents are involved. Our new technology. I also am very much involved in building a new tech school in Milwaukee that's going to allow for poor Milwaukee students to be able to have the opportunity to go to tech school and be able to become and have a skilled trade. We need so many more skilled workers in the state of Wisconsin, and we're putting emphasis on vocational education in Milwaukee Public Schools so that poor students will have an opportunity to learn a trade and have the opportunity to have a decent job when they get out. We also have to push very hard, as you know I've tried, Melody, to keep students in school. And that's why the choice is so important, because it gives people hope and opportunity. And private school choice, religious school choice, public school choice are all there, and we have many parents, 7,500 families now are coming forward and saying, we like the fact that we now have the choice to send our students, our sons and daughters, to the best school possible, and that's going to continue. And so I'm pretty proud of some of the things that are taking place in Milwaukee, and I think you're going to see a change around very quickly.
Mr. Garvey.
Sometimes when I listen to the governor, I'm not sure that I'm in the same state, because in spending time in the city of Milwaukee working with the superintendent, with school board members, with administrators and principals and teachers, what we see is that the governor has threatened to take over the Milwaukee schools. He is jumping ship on the question of public education by saying that we can take vouchers to go to private for-profit schools. And let me just mention this for a second. For the first time in our state's history, the legislature passed at the governor's request, and he signed into law, that we could have for-profit schools taking tax dollars to those schools with uncertified teachers. The question, of course, is how do we pay for the schools? How do we reduce class size? It's not enough to threaten the city of Milwaukee, and there are many other school districts with performance records about the same or even lower than the city of Milwaukee. You have to deal with the real issues. I have yet to hear a single proposal from the governor that would say, here's how we're going to reduce class size from kindergarten through third grade, from 1 to 15 to the teacher. We know that works. It actually came from a study from a Republican governor in Tennessee. So we know it works, and yet we can't get any support. We look at a city with 75% of the children qualify for free lunches. And those children are arriving at school oftentimes not ready to learn. We need enriching daycare, we need to have smaller class sizes, we need health care for all those children, and we need to have livable wages for the parents of those children so that the kids are ready to learn when they report to kindergarten.
Mr. Thompson, your rebuttal.
Well, Mr. Garvey doesn't know my record very well because I signed twice new laws that reduced the class size. We also put a 180% increase. We now are picking up 80% of the money for the Milwaukee Public Schools. We also, of course, are putting in charter schools by the city of Milwaukee and the vocational school and the University of Wisconsin, the only state, the only major city in America that has those kind of choices. And we're also putting a lot more money into technology and the vocational school, and we're doing this to improve the quality of life. And you know, 35% of the teachers in Milwaukee send their students, their children, to private schools. I'm sorry.
The next question is from Scott Robert Shaw to Mr. Garvey.
The public's trust of our elected officials at all levels of government, it seems, perhaps is at an all-time low. What can you say to the voters of Wisconsin to assure them that you will work on their behalf?
I think the most important question that you have to ask of people who run for public office is who got you there, who paid for it, where did you raise your money? We decided to limit our campaign contributions to $100 because we wanted to say to the people of this state, we're going into office with no strings attached. When we look at the question of new highways versus public transportation, we can ask ourselves, who are the best minds in the state, not who are the big contributors to the campaign of the governor. And I think that the first and most important thing that we can do as governor and lieutenant governor is to ask the people of this state to change the Constitution to make sure that no one can put private money into politics, because that's where things get distorted. If we look at every issue we're talking about tonight, Virtually everyone will somehow come back to the question of who put the money in. If you're talking about land use, it's a question of how much money do you get from the realtors or the developers. If you talk about gaming, it's how much money do you get from out-of-state gambling interests. If you talk about highways, how much do you get from the road builders? Those are not the questions that ought to be asked. The questions ought to be asked of those who are running for office. What are your ideas? What's your vision for the future? And how are you going to change it? The governor has had one chance to change the laws with respect to electronic filing. He signed it into law, but then chose not to put his filing on the internet as we have, even though obviously with the millions of dollars that he's raised, it would just be an easy task. In fact, we had a group called Geeks for Garvey who offered to do it for him so that we would know exactly where the money comes from, because that determines the policy.
Mr. Thompson.
12 years I have led this state. When I came in 12 years ago, the state of Wisconsin was really in bad shape. Today, we're the envy of the nation. High wages. In fact, we're the second highest, 8th highest in the country, second highest in the Great Lakes. Our median income was 5% below the national average when I came in. It's 5% above the national average right now. We have 3 million people working today in the state of Wisconsin, more than at any time before. We have more manufacturing jobs. In fact, we have the second highest creation of manufacturing jobs in the state of Wisconsin of all the states in America. Our quality of life is one of the highest in America. We have more people covered by health insurance than any other state. Hawaii went ahead just by a small percentage point this year, but 94% of our people are covered by health insurance. Family care, we're starting an innovative program to help the senior citizens in the state of Wisconsin so they can stay in their own home. We're putting $500 million into education for new technology. We're picking up 2/3 of the funding of schools. We're preserving more pristine land than any other administration ever, over 200,000 acres. In fact, I started a new state park in Milwaukee this week in 500 acres on the Wolf River in order to preserve for the people that want to hunt and fish and have a national preserve. These are the things. In regards to my opponent, he talks about $100, but now the $100 is $200, now it's $400, now it's $800, now it's $1,000, and that's $1,600. In regards to special interest, WEAC is out there, his teachers union, putting on his ads, and I think that is the biggest, one of the biggest problems with politics in our country.
Mr. Garvey,
it's hard to remember the question after that answer, but the question had to do with integrity. WEAC is not putting any ads of ours on television, I want to tell you that. When you talk about manufacturing jobs, let's take a look here. Pabst, right now at Harnischfeger, they have cut off the insurance for the retired workers. We look and we see what's happening to many of the manufacturing jobs in the state. The good jobs, many of them have left, over 8,000 from Briggs & Stratton, and many of the jobs that are here are low paying. We have lost 4.5% in terms of average wages in this state last year. So what we're looking at here is a problem that has to be addressed with integrity.
Thank you. Melissa Langman, you have the next question for Mr. Thompson.
Yes, I would like to know if the state's mining moratorium goes far enough, and there is talk of setting up a $288 to $300 million fund that would be used for cleanup should there ever be any sort of environmental disaster. Is that enough to protect the communities that might be affected?
Well, first off, the state of Wisconsin, we have the toughest mining permitting law in the country, in fact, in North America. And we also made it tougher when we passed the mining moratorium law, which I signed into law. And we also, of course, have got a protection fund. I really don't think the mine is going to go. I can assure you and promise you that no environmentally unsafe mine will ever be built under the Thompson administration. In order to accomplish that, I set up a scientific committee composed of scientists from the University of Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, from Marquette University, who are going to come in and review every plan, every permit application, and tell us, tell the DNR, tell me, tell the people of the state of Wisconsin, if this mine can be produced in a safe, environmentally manner. If it can't, it's not going to be built. And therefore, you know, when you already got the toughest mining law and you add a moratorium, and on top of that add a scientific committee, it's very doubtful that a mine is going to be built. But if it is built, it's going to be built in an environmentally safe manner.
Mr. Garvey.
One of the major differences between our two candidacies is simply our concern about the environment. I used to head the public intervener's office, at least supervise it as Deputy Attorney General. The governor eliminated our watchdog public intervener because it was inconvenient, it caused problems. They were able to sue the Department of Transportation. They held up the permitting process for the Crandon mine. I can tell you as governor there will not be a Crandon mine because it would risk the viability and the cleanliness or the clean water of the Wolf River. What's happened is that the governor has turned the Department of Natural Resources into a political agency that he controls by his appointment process. Garvey and Lawton will return the DNR to independent status. We're going to bring back the public intervener with a vengeance to make sure that the whims of politics will not change the ability of the public intervener to protect us. And I look at the mining that they're talking about now. The Crandon mine is just scratching the surface. There are many more mines that they're thinking of. If the governor wouldn't need to appoint 3 people to a panel, if we had an independent DNR, but the fact is it's no longer independent because he took the appointment process away from the citizen board, as he did with the Department of Agriculture, as he did by moving consumer protection from the Attorney General's office over to the Department of Agriculture. There is too much power in one person's hands. Our environment should not be at risk because of political contributions or because those who are supporting the office, the person who is in power at that time, wants to have things their way. It won't be under Garvey Lawton.
Your rebuttal, Mr. Thompson?
Well, we're talking about the mine. The mine is going to have to go through a lot of permitting process before it's built. Number 2, in regards to the DNR, 43 states appoint the Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources. The President of the United States appoints EPA Secretary and Department of Administration. We do have a public intervener, and it's in the Department of Natural Resources. We also have preserved more land than any previous administration. We got our clean air and clean water is 30% cleaner now than it was 12 years ago when I came in as governor, and at the same time we've grown our economy. I believe in the environment, and I have preserved more land than any governor ever before in the history of this state.
Thank you. Our next question is from Melody Wilson for Mr. Garvey.
Mr. Garvey, you've said many times that 12 years is long enough, 16 years would be too much. In fact, you said you would limit your own service to 8 years. Can you tell us why 12 years is long enough and why 16 years is too long for any one person in general terms?
I think when you're talking about the chief executive officer of any business, any union, any organization, it's too long. Certainly for governor it is, because there is so much power accumulated in the hands of one person and in one office. Too many people with the same ideas, too many people who know exactly how you can raise money. I mean, this governor has turned this into the most incredible money-raising machine in the history of this state. Virtually, I'm sure, he would be the idol of Mayor Daley or those who have come before him, because if you're in power, as the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel series said, it pays to know Tommy Thompson, because those who want something put money in. We could start by eliminating the money, but then you have to limit the terms to 2. 39 states have term limits. The U.S. Constitution says that the president can only serve for 2 terms. I think there's just too much power as the chief executive. It's not a question of just an arbitrary figure, but 8 years should certainly be enough to be governor of the state of Wisconsin.
Mr. Thompson.
First, my opponent talks about the need to get more people involved. I think the best way for people to get involved is to vote. People have voted me in as governor now 3 consecutive times. And 78% of the people of the state of Wisconsin approve of the job I'm doing and like the direction the state's going. I think it depends upon the candidate. I think it depends upon the ideas. I want to be able to continue to cut taxes. I've cut taxes 87 times. I've reduced tax burden in the state of Wisconsin by $8 billion. Our spending is the 35th lowest in the country, and we'll keep reducing the spending. I want to be able to reform the welfare system so every poor person in this state that's on welfare will have the opportunity to get out of poverty and be able to have a decent job. I want to be able to start skilled workers, be able to get more people involved in vocational education. I want to build stronger, more safer, and better schools all over the state of Wisconsin. I want to start a family care program for the elderly so the elderly can stay in their own home. A family care program that is right now is being talked about around the nation as our welfare program. Badger care. I want to extend health care to every poor family in the state of Wisconsin, something that other states talk about. We are doing it in the state of Wisconsin. I want to be able to put in new technology in every school, every public and private school in the state of Wisconsin, and every library, so a poor child can take a foreign language course no matter where he is. If he's up in Superior or in Ashland, can take a foreign language course from any university or vocational school in the state of Wisconsin. I want to drive this state so that it can be the best any state in the world right here in America, right here in Wisconsin.
Mr. Garvey on rebuttal.
I, too, want to make this the best state, but I don't think that one person should remain in office that long. 2 years ago, when the governor was trying to run for vice president, he published a book to say that this is where he was headed. Now he's got his eye toward Washington. What this state needs is a full-time governor paying attention to the problems we have. He can say all of the things that he would now like to have. He's had 12 years to do it. We have 500,000 people without insurance. We have the lowest wages in the Great Lakes area. Our wages have dropped. The DNR is no longer independent. We have the second highest taxes in the nation. That has to stop.
Our next question is from Scott Robert Shaw to Governor Thompson.
Since we're talking of length of service, not knowing for certain what will happen on the political scene nationally, will you pledge today that if elected to this next term, that you would serve the full 4 years of that term?
I'm not going to pledge. I am running for governor. I make no bones about that. I have no intentions for running for president. I have no intentions to plan to run for president. But I cannot make a pledge, you know, that if something in the future comes up that I might not consider running for president or vice president of the United States. I'm not counting on it, not planning on it. But right now, I'm dedicated to my job as governor of the state of Wisconsin. And I want to fight for the people of the state of Wisconsin. I want to reverse some of the things that are taking place at the national level, in which we're number 5-0 as far as getting money back from the federal government. And I want to be able to try and impress upon the Democrat administration in Washington that they're making changes, that they need to make changes so that we get more money back to the state of Wisconsin and other states. I want to start talking more about the devolution of authority, giving more responsibility back to the states. But right now, my full intention is to stay as governor of the state of Wisconsin. I want to be able to continue to drive the state of Wisconsin to improve the quality of life for all of our citizens in education and health care, welfare reform, in the conservation, in the purchase of land, new innovative plans for family care. This is what really gets me going. I am passionate about what we've already been able to accomplish in the state of Wisconsin and what I can do for the next 4 years for the betterment of the state of Wisconsin, so that going into the 21st century, we are the #1 state in America. That's my goal, that's my model, and that's my objective.
Mr. Garvey.
I think the answer was no. He will not take the pledge. His attitude seems to change a little bit if he's in Iowa or Washington or Texas, or whether he's here in the state of Wisconsin. Frankly, when we look at the state and the problems it has, we have the worst poverty level for African American children in the United States, second worst for Asian American children. We have to do better. Our schools now demand a full-time governor paying attention to what's going to happen to make sure that we do not put administrators into the awful position of choosing between special education and the arts program, or between programs for the talented and the gifted. That's the difficulty. We're the second highest tax state in the nation. Now, I don't want to give too much advice to my colleague, but I don't think he should run for president on the idea that I can raise your taxes to be #2, as we have been here in the state of Wisconsin. We look at our property tax, income tax, sales tax, user fees. Everything is up because of what many have called really irresponsible spending on the part of the governor when it comes to the state capital. When he ran the first time, he said he wanted to freeze state government. We've doubled the cost of state government. When he ran the last time, he said that was his last term. Well, I think where we are at the moment is we need a new governor, we need new ideas, a fresh approach. People who have been locked out of state government for 12 years can come in here with a kind of enthusiasm to tackle the problems without worrying where they raise the money, because those are the decisions that have been driving this administration for the past 12 years.
Mr. Thompson, you have 30 seconds on rebuttal.
I can't believe that. We're the 8th highest per capita income. We're 35th in the country as far as state spending. We're 45th as far as state employees in America. We are the 8th highest as far as per capita income. We are 5% above the median income. We have done this under my administration. When I started, the state of Wisconsin was in terrible shape. And we have been able to cut spending, cut taxes 87 times, and we've been able to reduce the tax burden by $8 billion.
Time is up. At this point, we do not have enough time for a full round of questions, so I'd ask for one more question and ask the candidates to limit their response to 1 minute, and there won't be an opportunity for rebuttal. And that question would be from Melissa Langman for Mr. Garvey.
And I'm going to stick with this theme. I think since we've started here, we'll stick with this topic. It's a pretty simple question. Is it fair for the voters not to pledge to fulfill the term of governor?
Well, frankly, I don't think so. I think if you're voting for someone for governor, for lieutenant governor, you ought to say, look, this is what I'm going to do. I plan to run. I plan to serve if elected. This is not a job application where you go in and you say, well, I'm looking for a better job, but I'd sure like this one for the moment. I want to be governor, and I think that distinguishes Tommy Thompson and myself. He would like to go to Washington. I've been to Washington. I would much rather stay here in the state of Wisconsin. So I look and I say, not only should you have the, to say to the voters, look, these are my plans. But I think you should also say, here's my lieutenant governor. And when I ask people to judge us, I say also judge us on the basis of who is running this state and who's going to be running the state as a team over the course of the next 4 years.
Mr. Thompson.
I intend to finish my term as governor of the state of Wisconsin. And that's the question you're asking. Yes, it is. I do. I want to continue to push forward. Wisconsin's a great state. We made it better. Our unemployment is the lowest it's ever been. We have 3 million people working. More people today are working than at any time before. Our wages are going up at 60% higher since 1990 than the national average. 60% higher than the national average. Our taxes are going down 87 times. Under the Garvey approach, you're going to have an immediate tax increase by taking cost controls off. I think people of the state of Wisconsin want a tax cut, not a tax increase, not an IOU promise that we may change the Constitution 4 years in the future. I'm going to continue to drive forward to improve the quality of life for our seniors, our children, our middle-income families, our poor-income families, and all over the state of Wisconsin. We have a great state. I just want to make it better.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That concludes the question and answer portion of our debate. Each candidate will now have the opportunity to make a 2-minute closing statement. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, John. Thank you all for watching this tonight. And I hope Wisconsin won the homecoming game tonight. I believe so strongly in what we've been able to do in the last 12 years. I know my opponent wants to build on fear. I want to build on partnerships. I want to make sure that Wisconsin is as strong as it possibly can be. That's why we're going out with family care, so that senior citizens can stay in their own home. A program that's innovative, that's one that's going to set the tone for the country. Our W-2 program, 88% of the people support it. Why? Because it works. It gives people hope and opportunity, gets them out of poverty, gives them a chance to live the American dream. We're going to cut taxes for every man, woman, and child across the state of Wisconsin, and especially the middle class. 90% of the money goes to the middle-income families, instead of an IOU promise that you may get a tax break 4 years in the future of my opponent. Instead of a tax increase like my opponent, I want to give a tax reduction to every person. I want to be able to build the educational system so every man, woman, and child is going to be able to say, you know, our educational system is the strongest and best in America. We in Wisconsin have a proud heritage. We've just gone through 150 years, a sesquicentennial. I was very much involved in that. And I can't tell you the pride and the proud people of the state of Wisconsin that have built this state. We build it together as partners instead of tearing down against business and it's criticizing this business or that business, this class against that class. I'm a builder. I build on hope. I build on successes. I build for the future. And I want Wisconsin to be the strongest state possible going into the 21st century. I want every man, woman, and child to be stronger tomorrow than it is today. Wisconsin's the state, and remember this, where Harleys roar, eagles soar, Packers score, and with your help, we can do more. Thank you so very much for being with us.
Thank you. Mr. Garvey, your 2-minute closing statement.
All right. If I were running for cheerleader, I would have to concede this election to Governor Thompson. I'm not. I'm running for leadership. I look at the community option program. We have 8,000 seniors on the waiting list, and that's unacceptable. That's more like a parking lot than a waiting list. During the Thompson years, 20,000 small family farms have gone out of business. I have not heard any comprehensive idea for how you deal with the agricultural problems in this state. Our family farmers are barely hanging on. When he talks about this great new economy and everyone's doing well, he has not been on the bus with us traveling around this state talking to families that are struggling to make it because of high property tax, high sales tax, high user fees, high licensing fees. He has not talked to those parents of the special needs children who are worried afraid that the way he has structured the revenue caps, the principals and the advisors and the school boards are making these awful choices that have to be made. He has not listened carefully to the University of Wisconsin system that is now the lowest in the Midwest in terms of resources that the state commits to it. Our library received no increase. We're now at the lowest point in terms of general purpose revenues going to our university system than ever before. We are now going to see, under the Thompson administration, much more money spent on prisons than we are on higher education. And yet we're not safer. What we ought to be doing is spending money for schools, for enriched daycare, for living wages, because the quality of life has something to do with how children learn. And what we have heard from the governor is that everyone is fine, and I'm sure that those who wear the $500 Governor's Club pin are doing well. They have insurance. Their children are making choices of schools. But for the rest of the people of this state, the property taxes, the sales taxes, and the other fees are making it difficult for them. Ours is a tax reduction for the middle class to cut property tax, to cut sales tax. That's the difference. The governor would cut taxes for those at the top of the economic ladder. We want to make sure that everyone in the state participates.
Thank you. That concludes the debate between gubernatorial candidates Tommy Thompson and Ed Garvey. This debate has been hosted by the Wisconsin Broadcasters Association through generous grants from Blue Cross and Blue Shield United of Wisconsin and Alliant Energy Corporation. We thank our candidates, Ed Garvey and Tommy Thompson, and we thank our panelists, Melissa Langben, WAOW-TV Wausau, Scott Robert Shaw, WIZM Radio La Crosse, and Melody Wilson, WITI-TV Milwaukee. Over 50 Wisconsin radio and television stations have broadcast this debate to ensure that every citizen of Wisconsin has had an opportunity to hear and see the two major candidates for Wisconsin governor in 1998. In the traditional spirit of service to their communities, they hope that bringing this political event to you as a public service will contribute positively to this campaign and aid Wisconsin voters as they approach their duty to elect Wisconsin's next governor on November 3rd. On behalf of Wisconsin's radio and television broadcasters and candidates Tommy Thompson and Ed Garvey, thank you for listening and watching. Good night.
This program has been made possible by Alliant and by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Wisconsin.